Thank you, Yoshin, for your teachings, and thank you, Busho and Ango, and thank you all for being here today. Let's take a moment just to sit together again, just to kind of release all that lovely hugging. I love it, Yoshin. I'm really going to keep using that one. Thank you all for being here, willing to listen. The quote, the title of this comes from a quote from Hakuin. I've been reading Hakuin on Kensho. I'm going to read you the full quote. I'm going to read it, try and read it kind of slowly, just so that you have a chance to take it in. Now, the verbal teaching of the Buddhas and the patriarchs are extremely deep, and one should not consider that one has mastered them completely after one has gone through them once or twice. When you climb a mountain, the higher you climb, the higher they are. When you go into the ocean, the farther you go in, the deeper it is. It is the same in this case. It is also like forging iron to make a sword. It is considered best to put it in a forge over and over, refining it again and again. Though it is always the same forge, unless you put the sword in over and over and refine it 100 times, it can hardly turn out to be a fine sword. As we deepen our understanding of Mondo Zen and Mondo Zen facilitation, it's becoming clear that the difference between, well, I've read it, I've gone through Mondo facilitation once, I get it, I've had that experience, versus this is a forging process. This is a going in deeply, hundreds of times, is really the underlying theme of this particular Dharma talk today. And pointing out the wisdom of the work that is involved with Junpa's Dharma teachings. Okay, because they really are one of putting ourselves in the forge daily when we get triggered, practicing regularly, sitting on our cushion regularly, over and over and over again, and developing this particular, investing in ourselves in that way to be one with the Dharma. So how do we get there? How do we get here? Well, I'm going to go all the way back to Buddha and start with his teachings, which often is called the Four Noble Truths, but I like some of the more modern interpretations as the Fourfold Path. Okay, because it's actually, to me, more about an ongoing journey with these four principles than they are truths. Truth comes from an era where we saw spiritual doctrine and as well, stands for itself. Truth. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not, but the truth is that we have to forge these. So it's more of a fourfold path. And the first of the path is represented by the word dukkha, which is historically interpreted as suffering. And but some of the newer interpretations actually may interpret that word really as life as it is. And life as it is includes all that arises in our experience. And we as beings often, not always, experience that as suffering, as the natural phenomenon of being in these bodies, being in this world. So if we unpack that a little bit, we look at it as a type of conditioning that occurs through growing up in society, in our worlds, in our lives, and having events occur that we experience as painful. People die, people get sick, we suffer our own illnesses, we have emotional distress. So our reactions naturally occur in response to the environment that we live in, and that is the nature of being an organism, being alive. What distinguishes higher brains, having three type parts in our brain, is that we experience that as sensations, we experience that as feelings, we experience that as thoughts. And that dukkha is that conditioned response that occurs through our lives, through living, through being here. And so comprehending that experience is actually not just, well, there's suffering out there, life is suffering. Often there's a critique of Buddhism because it's sort of like, well, it sort of posits life as suffering. I think I would look at it more as to understand life, to understand my experience, to be able to be present for what's arising. I actually appreciate Angel Kyoto Williams's teachings brings to this idea. It's not, I experience suffering, do something. It's, can I actually be present to the depth of the experience that I am having? So that's actually learning to be experienced with what I am experiencing in my body, in my feelings, in my thoughts. Okay. We also recognize that as three brain beings, we have automated responses from our brain stems. Fear just arises. I don't choose it. Fight, flight, freeze. It just arises. That's what that's designed to do. That worked really well if I were being chased by a lion. Thank goodness that arises. Fear. Midbrain has a bunch of emotional attachments and feelings and thoughts, feelings that go with experiences of interpersonal sadness, anger, anxiety. Our higher brain is thoughts. I'm wearing a mask. That person isn't. That's a judgment. I'm vaccinated. I'm doing good. Are you? That's a thought. Where's the suffering? What's the experience? How do I understand myself? How do I be with all the experiences that I'm having? The first of the fourfold path. Okay. Comprehending what is here, what is arising. Dukkha is the Pali term. The second of the fourfold path, samudaya, is being able to let go of that arising, of that dukkha. In a sort of classical Zen perspective, we often use the word shikantaza. Can we let it arise, the anger, the sadness, the fear, and the grief, and notice that it will fall away? I don't have to do anything. Actually, perhaps not doing anything is a skill of allowing it to understand it, notice it in my body, embody it, and notice that it will naturally fall away if I allow it. To let go of the arising of the dukkha. Now, in the second noble path, they introduced the term Tanya, I think it's how it's pronounced, which is where this idea of it's classically interpreted as desire, right? And noticing that to some extent, it's the desire to not have the suffering, the attachments to the dukkha, to the experiences I'm having, which is the hard part to let go of. That could be the attachments to the anger or the attachments to not having the anger. Could be the attachments to I'm doing good because I did what I'm supposed to do, to the attachment to I think everybody should be doing it this way. What's the matter with this world who can't do it the right way? So letting go of desire, of Tana, second noble path. Now, I was thinking about this in terms of Mondo Zen facilitation and Junpo's teachings, and when I look at the emotional koans, interestingly enough, the 11th koan is, I'm going to read the exact koan so I get it right. Luckily, I have my trusty Mondo manual right next to me. What are the deeper feelings that lie beneath violent anger, shame, and disconnection? And I started to think, perhaps, because I think most people know, when you get down to care, they underneath, because I care, that's a little bit like Tana. That's a little bit like desire. That's a movement. I care. It's different than care arises or not knowing. The first ones, it's actually often my emotional response. My initial one is dukkha. It's my reactive suffering. But underneath that, when I examine that, I go underneath far enough down, there's some desire in me to be a good person, to care about others, to follow the path the right way. I vow, however innumerable all beings, I vow to liberate and serve them all. Boy, that's a caring statement if there ever was one, huh? It's pretty big. You got to have no ego to have that big of a thought, if that's possible. So perhaps that's the second path. That is samudaya. I care. Underneath the dukkha is caring. So letting go of the arising, which is in the Mondo process, is I care. Can I drop into clear, deep heart mind? Third of the noble path, Naroda. Ceasing can be beheld. There is ceasing of this arising of dukkha and Tana, of care. There is awakening process. In Hollow Bones, it's clear, deep heart mind. Naroda. There is ceasing of the suffering and of the caring, of the desiring. So that in Hollow Bones, we often talk about genuine insight. We practice on our cushion. We practice on our cushion through concentration, to begin to release the narrative self and to be able to settle and sink into dhyana. We have a dharana practice to settle into dhyana. Dhyana is the Sanskrit, I believe, which gets translated into Chan, which translated into Zen. Kensho experience is, wow, this experience is something that I just had. Because when I start to think about it, it's not here anymore. Because that's the I shows up. Often the value of going on sesshinzu retreats is because when we sit and concentrate and quiet enough, this ceasing of this arising of suffering and of this caring can occur. And so this goes back to Kensho, or I should say Hakuin on Kensho. He's saying, great, Kensho experience, but it's got to go back into the forge over and over and over and over and over again. Right? That's how that sword gets refined. And many are here because we're committed to that particular path of forging our sword, of going into the forge over and over, discovering the forge could be the same flame that we're in over and over and over again, and thinking in terms of Mondo koan work, the suffering, the reactive pattern, the tana, the ceasing, the arising can be let go. I can let go of the care and drop into clear, deep heart mind. Drop naroda. Ceasing is beheld. But we're not done. The emotional koan work is the path, the fourth of the fourfold way. Live with that. Be in the world, right? Have that. The forge is our daily existence, and we continue to refine our sword by practicing, by accepting that this is a path that I take, I choose, I remember and choose. So the fourth of the noble path, of the noble truths, I'll keep interspersing my language, the fourfold way, is marga. There's two ways of translating it. The path is to be cultivated. The fourth. So we have dukkha, suffering, life. Samudaya, the rising can be let go of. Naroda, ceasing, is to be beheld. It's something that I have to return to through my practice that ceasing experience so that I can, fourth pathway, cultivate it. Now, this is where in the Theravada, there's the Eightfold Path, which we don't spend much time in Mahayana talking about the Eightfold Path, but it's all looped together and they're all describing the same path. But Junpo often talked about the first of the Eightfold Path, which is right view or right understanding, right? A more postmodern translation, rather than saying right, which implies correct or wrong, you could say complete view, complete understanding. And then the rest of the path is complete thought, complete speech, actions, complete livelihood, living in the world, complete effort, complete mindfulness, and complete concentration or samadhi. When you look at those 8, you can actually break them up into 3 little groups. The first, not starting from the top, is in in the Mahayana tradition we call Sila, ethics, is speech, action, and livelihood, right? That's how the organism interacts with the world and the ethics of that, Sila, the moral way that we live. And for that, aside from having a meditation practice, doing emotional koans, we have precepts that we investigate, that we allow to form our way of interacting with the world, which does imply in some way that sitting on the cushion by itself doesn't necessarily give me all the tools I need for complete right speech. There's some other things to think about. So the first cut of the three was speech, action, and livelihood, and that's Sila, morality. Second grouping is really dhyana, mindfulness, meditation, and was the last two, mindfulness and concentration. And so that is very much shows up in Mahayana. And we're crossing systems, the 6 paramitas, where we are in hollow bones, genuine insight, meditation practice, practicing that ceasing so I can behold it, abide in it, is what the Vajrayanas would like, the practitioners would like to say. Can I abide in clarity part mind? Different conversation than is it experience that I'm having. And then the last group actually is the first two, which is right view or understanding and right thoughts. And in that way, in the Mahayana tradition, that's where we come up with this wonderful term, prajna. Prajna, which is the Great Wisdom Heart Sutra, Prajna Paramita, which is wisdom. So it's not intellectual understanding. Oh, I get the teachings. I've read them on the manual. I went through it. I have the experience. I get it. It's actually forging the sword of the self over and over and over again, having that understanding occur as I discover what is arising. So that path, the Eightfold Path, takes us back to the beginning. Dukkha. How do I understand dukkha? I comprehend it when it arises. I understand that as an organism, I get triggered. Interestingly, over time, we start to know what our triggers are, but it seems to be the way this organism's designed, and I'm kind of guessing you're designed this way too, is you kind of don't know what your triggers are. There are endless triggers out there until it's after it. It happens. I am triggered. This person, right? That is the way we have thousands of years of evolution in our nervous systems. There's trauma all the way back, not very far away, in all our family systems. And it's in our nervous systems, and that's conditioned. And we'll discover it in the moment. Emotional koan work, reactive anger, whatever is arising, dukkha, is arising because I care. I care. Can I let go and settle into the ceasing of this? And then the ceasing of this is to come back to the practice. And the practice is found in the interpersonal, the Sila. So moving back basically to forging the sword of awareness, of awakening, it seems to me that Junpo's offering here is its own path to Buddhist teachings, which is focused on genuine insight and emotional maturity. Right? And emotional maturity it's taking a specific focus on a specific kind of subset of what you would call dukkha, and saying, this is the kind of work that I'm willing to behold as it arises in my life. And here's the technology, the method, the emotional koan. Comprehend the experience that's arising for me right now, right here. We teach in the facilitator program embodied immediacy, learning and becoming more open to what is arising in all of me, not just the habitual ways of understanding self. Being able to let go of that experience of what's arising in order to behold the ceasing of that reactivity of those feelings, remembering and choosing the experience of clear deep heart mind. But because that's why it's a koan. That's not enough. It's a path to now reach forward into the interrelational world and respond with wisdom, with prajna. Respond with complete understanding of the imperfections of everything, the impermanence of everything that's arising, and the ability to bring forward that compassion which is available to us when we allow ourselves to remember and choose. Now, the verbal teaching of the Buddhas and patriarchs are extremely deep, and one should not consider that one has mastered them completely after one has gone through them once or twice. When you climb a mountain, the higher you climb, the higher they are. When you go into the ocean, the farther you go in, the deeper it is. It is the same in this case. It is also like forging iron to make a sword. It is considered best to put it into a forge over and over, refining it again and again. Though it is always the same forge, unless you put the sword in over and over and refine it 100 times, it can hardly turn out to be a fine sword. Thank you, my friends.